Let's jump right into this, because the assassination of President John F. Kennedy is an absolute labyrinth. We're talking thousands of books, endless speculation, and decades of intense, sometimes furious debate. So today, we're going to cut through the noise. Our goal is to create a beautiful explainer that visually maps out exactly what the government wants, the wild forensic science, and the massive cultural myths that surrounded that day down. Hey, we aren't here to take sides. We're just here to impartially navigate this crazy web of information together. To make sense of it all, here's our roadmap. We'll start with the official government verdict, look at the famous single bullet theory, the accidental friendly fire hypothesis, the mob and the CIA, a quick stop at the fringe theories, and finally, we'll ask why these conspiracies never seem to die. Alright, part one, the official government verdict. To really understand the friction here, you have to look at the stark contrast between the two major government investigations. It's wild. Back in 1964, the Warren Commission decisively concluded that Lee Oswald acted entirely alone. Case closed, right? Well, 15 years later, in 1979, the House Select Committee on Assassinations reinvestigates the whole thing and concludes that JFK was likely assassinated as a result of the conspiracy. That monumental flip-flop right there, that is what fuels decades of debate. Looking at the actual historical text from the House Select Committee's Summary of Findings. Section C puts it right there on the historical record. The committee believes, on the basis of the evidence available to it, that President John F. Kennedy was probably assassinated as a result of a conspiracy. Now, they admitted they couldn't identify a second gunman, but this statement gave official validation to what a lot of Americans were already thinking.
But here's the catch. That exact same official document explicitly ruled out several major groups. The HSCA officially found that the Secret Service, the FBI, and the CIA were not involved as institutions. That being said, they didn't let them off the hook. The report heavily criticized these agencies for varying degrees of incompetency, inadequate protection for the president, and just a deeply flawed sharing of intelligence before and after the tragedy.
Moving on to part two, the single bullet theory.
Okay, so you can't talk about the official narrative without understanding the single bullet theory, officially known as Warren Commission Exhibit 399 or CE 399. This is literally the linchpin of the whole lone gunman story. It claims that a single 3-centimeter-long bullet caused all the non-fatal wounds to President Kennedy and then kept right on going to cause every single wound to Texas Governor John Connally, who was sitting in the jump seat right in front of him.
The sheer physics of this are just staggering. Analysts traced a meticulous, almost unbelievable physical route for this one projectile. They say it passed through the back of Kennedy's neck, exited his throat, traveled over 2 feet in the air, hit Governor Connally's back, smashed through 5 inches of rib bone, exited below his right nipple, shattered his right wrist, and then finally embedded itself into his left thigh. That is one single bullet piercing 15 layers of clothing, 7 layers of skin, muscle tissue, and dense bone.
Now you're probably wondering, why on earth would the government rely on such a crazy trajectory? Well, it all comes down to the number 2.3. Ballistics experts test-fired Oswald's Carcano rifle and figured out that the absolute minimum time needed to work the bolt action and fire 2 successive shots was 2.3 seconds. But when you watch the famous Zapruder film, Kennedy and Connally react to their wounds within a fraction of a second of each other. So, to maintain the lone gunman theory, investigators were basically forced by the timeline to conclude that one bullet had to have hit both men.
Let's shift gears to part 3, the accidental friendly fire.
This is where we get into some really plausible alternatives. Ballistics expert Howard Donahue spent years looking at the evidence and proposed a tragic but fascinating theory known as mortal error. He concluded that yes, Oswald fired the first shot, but the fatal head wound? That was actually an accidental discharge from Secret Service agent George Hickey's high-velocity AR-15 rifle. Donahue argued that the ballistics of the fatal shot match an AR-15 way better than Oswald's old military rifle.
Let's walk through how this incredibly unfortunate event could have played out. Event 1. Oswald fires from the book depository. Event 2. Agent Hickey, riding in the follow-up car, grabs his AR-15 and flips off the safety. Event 3. Secret Service agent Clint Hill yells, causing both the presidential car and the follow-up car to suddenly accelerate. And finally, Event 4. Hickey, who is unstably standing on the seat cushion instead of the floorboard, falls backward from the sudden jolt, accidentally pulling the trigger and causing a fatal friendly fire incident.
All right, part 4, the mob and the CIA.
So conspiracy proponents love to point to 2 massive, really compelling motives here. On one side, you have organized crime. With figures like Carlos Marcello and Jack Ruby's undeniable mob ties, people suggest the mafia wanted brutal retaliation for the Kennedy administration's aggressive legal crackdowns. On the flip side, you've got the CIA. There was some deep political friction there. After the disastrous Bay of Pigs invasion, JFK reportedly vowed to splinter the CIA into 1,000 pieces. He even fired the agency's director. So for a lot of folks, that's ample motive.
Now, academic research highlights something critical. Regardless of whether the CIA was directly involved in pulling the trigger, they undeniably suffered a colossal intelligence failure that day. Oswald had actually been under CIA surveillance. He had visited Soviet and Cuban embassies in Mexico City just shortly before the assassination. And what followed the tragedy was a whole lot of stonewalling by the CIA against government investigations. Basically, they covered up their own intelligence failures, which naturally only fueled more suspicion.
But here's an absolutely fascinating twist about the CIA theory. Declassified documents show that the idea of the CIA orchestrating the hit was actually one of the earliest examples of modern fake news. The Soviet Union actively spread this disinformation, planting stories in a pro-Soviet Italian newspaper claiming the CIA shot the president using a Rome-based trade group as a front. It's just an incredible example of geopolitical manipulation taking root in our cultural consciousness.
Let's look at Part 5, Fringe Theories and Oddities. From gritty geopolitics, things quickly go to bizarre extremes. You've got people blaming the Umbrella Man, who was weirdly standing under an open umbrella on a perfectly sunny day. Others point the finger at the Illuminati, claiming they were trying to protect the Federal Reserve. There are theories about an accidental Coca-Cola purchase. And yes, there's even a theory out there that aliens orchestrated the whole thing with a secret gas device to cover up a lunar base called Project Luna.
But let's actually zoom in on that Coca-Cola theory for a second, because it perfectly captures our obsession with this case. The theory goes that Oswald acted alone, but right after the assassination, he was seen in the book depository buying a Coke from a vending machine. The problem? Oswald was a notorious Dr. Pepper fanatic. So the author of this theory argues that this proves his guilt. Why? Because the adrenaline and nerves of having just shot the president made him push the wrong button. It just goes to show how even the most mundane, tiny details of that day have been hyper-analyzed and twisted into elaborate psychological profiles.
And that brings us to Part 6. Why conspiracies never die.
This is the core question of our entire explainer. With mountains of forensic data, thousands of interviews, and exhaustive government reports, why do a majority of Americans still believe in a conspiracy? Why does our collective psychology just refuse to let this one specific event go?
Well, historians point out a huge flaw in how we process this event. Almost all of these alternative theories rely heavily on what's called negative evidence. That means they find apparent flaws, missing pieces, or contradictions in the official Warren Commission narrative. But here's the thing, finding a flaw in the official story is not the same as bringing forward concrete positive proof of a conspiracy. To scientifically prove a conspiracy, you need positive evidence. And historians argue that concrete, undeniable positive proof has simply never surfaced.
I'm going to leave you with a pretty profound thought from historians who study this. They say that JFK assassination theories disregard the role of contingency in world affairs, because most people have difficulty accepting that sometimes bad things happen by chance. Think about it. Maybe our collective obsession with these theories is really just our inability to accept the terrifying reality that a massive, world-altering tragedy could be caused by meaningless, random chance. So I'll ask you, does a massive event always require a massive organized cause? Or are we all just desperately looking for patterns in the chaos to make ourselves feel safe?